What's going on, everybody? Metaverse Josh here with the second episode of Building the Metaverse. This series is about creating metaverse worlds using Unity and uploading them into spatial.io. In the last episode, we covered creating this classroom and just doing some basic texturing and getting our directional light just basically set up and all of the configuration that you need in order to get spatial.io worlds uploaded. Now, one thing I know I did forget to cover because I was already logged into it is the spatial SDK. Now, see, I'm already logged into it, and so I'm getting all of this here. But when you first pull this up, you'll probably get something that says login, and it'll look something like this. So what you'll have to do is click this get login token. It's going to pull up a website, and you copy your login token and paste it here, and then everything else will be available. So here we are, and you probably have a different scene than me, but if you're following along with this Sketchfab model or a different one, I did some basic texturing here again, but one thing that you probably noticed, and it kind of looks fake here, we want to make this more realistic looking by finishing up our texturing and doing some basic lighting in the scene. So now, first thing I like to do, and this may not be what everybody who uses Unity would do, a lot of people would say lighting comes last, but when it comes to me, I really like to get a basic idea of what it's going to look like with some lighting baked in, and so I kind of do that first sometimes. Now, one thing about baked lighting is it's different than real-time lighting in the way that if you have your avatar or something moving across the scene here and you see the real-time shadows that follow that character, that's a real-time light. Baked lighting, however, will create what looks to be like shadows and things based off of where light sources were here in our editor. When we bake that lighting, it gets put into a sort of like a texture that gets baked onto the objects here, and then it gets stuck like that. So one of the things you might want to do before, or at least consider before baking your lighting, even if it's not permanent, just if you want to keep it like that for a while, is making sure that everything is kind of situated in the way you want. So one of the first things that I'm gonna kind of show you how to do, and with that in mind, is that I know that these seats, we want those to kind of be out a little bit from the desk because people are going to want to sit in them. So before I start baking shadows and things, I want to situate all of this in such a way that that I'm going to be happy with it later. So one of the things that you can do in this situation, I'm just going to look over here in my hierarchy on the left. Again, all of these chairs have been kind of labeled for me, it looks like. So I should be able to just select them all in the hierarchy by holding the shift key. I click the first one, then click the last one, and I got them all. If you're not lucky enough to have them all labeled or in order like this, you can also do the same thing by just holding the control button and then clicking the different objects that you want to select. So you can see it's not as accurate in the preview window because of depth and all that in the 2D. So you kind of got to be careful when you select things, but you can kind of get an idea of where it's selecting, and then again, you can just continue hitting control to select all these objects. So now that I have all of my chairs selected, one of the things I want to do is I want to kind of move them out of the desk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make sure that I've got the move tool selected. These are different tools over here that you can use to manipulate the objects. You got I could rotate it if I want. I can scale it up or down. But right now I just want to move it. And so I'm going to grab this arrow here, and I'm just going to slide. I'm going to slide the chairs back just a tad, so that anybody who wants to sit in the chair, they'd have plenty of room to sit down, and their legs and all aren't going to be clipping through the desk. And so that's kind of how I want that, I think. And I'm going to leave that there for now. And so now, before I do anything else, I want to make sure that before I add lighting and all, that everything is exactly how I want it, in the properties inspector window here. So one of the things that we talked about in the previous video was cast shadows being off for all these objects to give us some quick lighting in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on for all of my objects. So now you can see there's some shadows here. But one of the things that's kind of tricky about Unity, at least in this preview window here, before we actually get in the game, is that it kind of is misleading about what kind of lighting you're going to have. So this here shows that you can see the ceiling and all. But if we go back to spatial, I'm just going to go back to spatial.io for a second and then go into the spaces. I'm just going to load up this space here. And you're going to see real quick that actually the lighting I'm getting is from outside, and it's being able to come through some of the objects, but you're going to see that I'm not getting light on the faces of the objects that aren't facing the light. So since that light, that directional light, is outside, I can see light from the direction of the light, which I'm zooming my camera out and you can see. So you can see how that looks like there's light in there. But if I turn around and look this way, it's dark. So it doesn't look like that in our game editor, right? But it's going to look like that when you upload your world, because this is what the real-time light is actually doing. And so here's the thing. In a real situation where we were inside of a building here, the light outside, the sun, would not have any effect on what is going on in here outside of what actually comes through the cracks and the blinds and things. So we do want sort of what's happening down here on the floor to happen, that type of shadowing, but we don't want the outside directional light to really do much else in our scene. And so when we come back to, I'm just going to close this, we come back to our game editor, one of the things that I want to do now is I want to make sure that my outside directional light, at least while I'm editing all of this, is not going to influence what I'm seeing here. So what I like to do, and I don't leave this on forever, but what I like to do is find the things that are, they should be a barrier between my outside light and my inside light, and I go ahead and I'm telling it in my material to render both faces so that I can block that outside light. And you can see really quickly that I turned that on for the ceiling, and I could quickly just blocked out a ton of light. I'm going to have to do that for the other objects up here and the walls and all. But then you can quickly inside of this window see how dark it is and then see what your lights are going to do. And so before I do anything else, I'm going to actually come zoom outside of here and show you here's where my directional light is. And it really doesn't matter where you place this in your scene. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of put it close by so you can manipulate it while you're in the area that you want to be. But you can see that, I'm just going to actually allow the light back through here by doing the front again. I'm going to manipulate this light so you can see what it does. So you can see as I turn this light, rotate it, I've used the rotate tool here. I'm actually manipulating which direction these lights go. And if you zoom out or come outside the structure, let's see if I can find it here. You can actually see where the light is. It'll look like a sun. Actually, there it is. So as I'm manipulating this, you can see where it's moving in the scene. So I can actually just control kind of my sun source here, and you can see what that does. Now again, because I'm inside, I'm indoors, that actually shouldn't have a whole lot of effect on my lighting. So I want to make sure that while I'm manipulating all this, that it looks like that. So I'm just going to render both faces of the materials that I'm using to block out the sun. So I'm just going to change those things up real quick on the walls, on the ceilings, anything that should keep light out. And so I'm just going to do that really quickly. Okay, so now I've got all of my materials that are in between the sun source in my scene and the actual objects inside of my scene. They're all being blocked out now, and so now I can kind of get an idea of how dark it's going to be in here. It's actually going to be much darker than this, but at least while we are editing inside of this editor, it's not going to be completely dark, so you can kind of see what you're doing. You can change the lighting in the scene by toggling this here, where you can just kind of see everything regardless of the lighting, or it'll get dark if you have no light. So we're going to keep it like this for now, so I can decide kind of where I want to have everything else. And so I've got my textures all done, and then while I'm on the topic of textures, I do want to bring up, so in the last video we had a test sandbox that didn't upload properly because it was over 100 megabytes. I was informed by one of the spatial developers that actually that's because my textures were high resolution and they were too large to upload to the sandbox. So I took a look at that. My normal textures were really large, a lot of them over 10 megabytes, so I just deleted all the normal textures from this model that I got from Sketchfab. And so now my package is much smaller and I can test it. And so we're going to do that later. But for now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to start adding lighting to my scene. So I've got my textures done. I've got my materials kind of blocking my light out. And I've got the natural light that I want that's going to kind of flood through this door here and our back. You can see in the model there's some cracks in between the blinds here and the wall, so we are going to allow some lighting to kind of come through here, and but we want to create the indoor lighting here. And so one of the things that I'm going to show you real quickly is some the differences between some of the lights. So you got your directional light that's going to kind of be in your scene by default when you first make your project. That's going to be your sun source, and we want to create additional lights in the scene. They're going to give us the baked lighting that we want. And so one of the things that you can do right away to start working with lighting is going to be to go to Window and then Rendering and then Lighting. And so once you have the lighting window up, I like to kind of bring it over here in the left portion of the workspace here. You can put it wherever you like. I like to go ahead and get this out there. You can start looking at some of the lighting settings, but the first thing you'll need to do is when you're under the Scene tab here under Lighting, click New Lighting Settings, and what that's going to do, I like to just click the top level Assets folder here and click New Lighting Settings, and it's going to create a new lighting settings object here in your project. And so you can just leave it saying New Lighting Settings. You can rename it if you'd like it, if you're going to use different settings in your project, but I normally typically only use one, so we're just going to leave it at that. And so in the inspector window here, now that we're looking at the lighting settings, this is going to tell us how exactly we're going to handle lighting in our scene. And so what I like to do right away, since I do have a high performance GPU, I'm going to go ahead and change the light mapper to GPU. That's going to be a ton faster than the CPU for sure. And then these default lighting settings, we can leave this for now. There's much better lighting settings, but this will quickly give you a bake that'll give you some idea of what's going on. This is not going to be what we're going to use in the final version of the project, but I will go over these lighting settings with you in another video for sure. So now we got the basic lighting settings. We got our GPU renderer. Pretty much everything in here will be fine just for now. We're not going to worry about a skybox for now. I will teach you how to create a skybox in another video that will influence your real-time lighting in a way that the scene kind of takes lighting sometimes from the skybox if you let it. Um, we can turn that off by going here, going to environment reflections, and we can just use a custom reflection instead of the skybox. But using the skybox, if you have different colors in it, it will use that to sort of tint your scene a little bit. So for right now, we're going to leave that. You can choose the sun source from your scene if you want, and just select the directional light there. That's this one that we were manipulating earlier. And so other than that, we're not going to bake light maps yet because we haven't created any internal lighting, but we're about to do that here in just a second. So now I pretty much got my scene ready to create lights for it, and I'm going to do that real quick just to kind of give you an idea what it's going to look like. So we'll start here. It's a good spot, I think. So I'm just going to start right here. I'm going to right click over here in the hierarchy, and I'm going to go to light, and then I'm going to click point light. And then what that's going to do is it's going to create a light source in my scene that I can then move around, and you can see how it kind of gives me an idea of what this light is going to look like in my scene. And so right now it's a basic kind of white light, intensity level of 1, right, and a range of 10. And so this is your basic default values for a light. And what we want to do is just kind of quickly make this look like it is a light source in the scene. So in this scene, you've got this sort of recessed area that we could sort of tuck that light into. And you can quickly see that even though, I could change the intensity here to say a value of 5 or 10 even, I can still get some of that light that shines through to the rest of the objects in my scene, but it doesn't really sort of bleach out the ceiling. And so I'm going to give you an idea of what that would look like otherwise. If I'm going to put that back to a value of 1, maybe a range of 10, right? And I'm just going to bring the light here. Now it would, if I change the intensity or the range, it would give me light on my objects here, but at the same time, it's going to just shine equally up at the top. Now that might be fine if my light source was actually here, like if it were a lamp. But I wanted to make it seem like it's coming from outside of these recessed areas here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually tuck that right in there. And so if I was looking up here, it's going to be kind of blinding looking at it, right? Because it's going to be really bright. But what that's going to do is allow me to sort of change the intensity. I'm going to change that to a 10. Change the range to, let's see, 20. Let's see how far that goes. That's actually kind of big. So here's another thing you can do. If you don't really know what these values look like, you can kind of zoom out and just change, manipulate the lighting here by grabbing the little square and just kind of pulling it in and out, and that'll give you an idea of how far that lighting can actually reach. And so we want it to seem like it's it's a light that's actually coming from in here. Now another thing we can do, if this point light isn't kind of working out the way you want, like this is kind of neat how it's shining out, even though that's realistically not what would happen. I kind of like what it's doing there, so I may leave that, but I'm going to change this to, instead of a point light, I'm going to change it to a spotlight. And so now you can see it's a different type of light. I can use that rotate tool here to manipulate this into shining completely down. Now at this point, it's not doing me much good because it's not really doing anything but shining down at the floor. And so I want to change the intensity a little bit, and then I also want to change the spread, the shape of this light. So if I do it this way and spread it out, you can see that this might actually also give me the type of lighting I'm looking for. It's sort of a cone shape. It's not overwhelmingly blinding coming out of the receptacle here. So this actually might be another way to do this. And so you just have to sit here and sort of manipulate these values until you get the kind of lighting you're looking for. And so for right now, I don't necessarily want this to be, like this blinding light coming straight out of the ceiling here. So I'm just going to go with that intensity level of 30, okay, and sort of spread it out. And this looks like kind of what I'm looking for. And I'm actually going to tone it back down to 20 because sometimes when you get the rest of the lights in here, it's going to be a lot brighter than what you think. And so the 10 value is what was default. We could go to 15 or 20 and see what sort of happens there. I'm going to go to just 15 to see what that looks like. Now, that is one light. So now we have all these receptacles in here, and I'm going to have to, multiply that a bunch of times. And so another thing I like to do is, to keep all of this sort of neat and tidy, is to look over here in the hierarchy on the left. I'm going to right click the point light, and I'm going to create a new empty parent. And so what that's going to do is create a game object right above that. And you can just right click this and hit rename. And we're just going to name this to ceiling lights. So now I have a group that I can kind of collapse and kind of keep all of my lights grouped with, because now I can hit Control C and then hit Control V right after that, and that will paste that light and create a second one. So alternatively, you can right click it and hit copy, and then right click back in here and hit paste. I'm going to do that just to show you how that works. So I have two, and you see this one didn't actually go underneath my empty parent, so I just moved it. So now all three of those are in the same place. Now you'll see that this is going to be much brighter now because it's actually three lights stacked on top of each other, and that's not what I want. This is going to be easy to move these since they're kind of lined up already. So I'm just going to move one here, you see, and then I'm going to click there again and then move the third one here. And so now I have three lights, and you can see that quickly multiplying the amount of lights that you have in your scene is going to create that that brightness that you're looking for. And so I'm just going to continue copying and pasting those lights and filling in where in your model there should be lights. So sometimes this is a little tricky and sometimes it's easy. In this case with this model, because the model creator did give us some receptacles to follow, this is going to be kind of tedious but very easy to do. And now I'm going to fill in the rest of these receptacles with lights just the way that I have here, by copying and pasting the different light sources until they're all present in the scene. And one thing I'm going to do before I actually go and replace all these lights, this is an important piece that I forgot to mention. There's different types of lights that you have, and you have what's called a real-time light, and a mixed light, and a baked light. So these three types of lighting we'll go over real quick. So a real-time light in your scene is like the directional light. That actually places shadows on moving objects like avatars in your scene. Typically, you only want to have one of these. It really takes a lot of processing power to run a real-time light in a scene. And so you want to keep that to one if you can possibly help it. And so we want to change this to baked. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm only using these light sources to bake lighting in my scene. I'm not going to use them as real-time lights. So now I'm going to create a light source for each one of these light receptacles in my scene, so that I get the full lighting that I'm looking for. So I'm going to just speed up the video a little bit here and put some music in so you can watch what I'm doing here. And then towards the end, I'm going to show you the settings that I'm going to use before I bake the lighting. Okay, now we have all of the lights and our light sources created in our scene here, and we haven't baked anything yet. I want to go over some of the different settings that you have for your lights here. Now that I have them all created, I can actually select them all here, and you'll see that I created a second group for the lights here in the front so I can control them separately. But I'm going to select all of the lights. Now I can actually modify the range, the intensity, all of that at the same time, even the color. And so one of the things that you can do with this is change the color. So if I don't like just the white, I can actually go back with sort of a warmer yellow, or even blue, or whatever color you like. So I'm actually going to go with something a little bit warmer, um, like maybe an off-white, sort of cream, almost yellow tinge. We're going to go with that. And with the intensity, again, you won't know exactly what it's going to look like until you bake the actual lighting. We can change it to 20 or 15 or whatever. And see, some of the lighting back there looks kind of intense, so I'm just going to leave it at 10, I think. And so this looks kind of good. Let's see what we can go with that. And then you've got your front lighting up here, which I'm going to leave sort of as the brighter area. And that's okay. We're going to leave that at 15. And I'm going to bake with this. These settings. This is pretty basic. It's just going to be a first bake. That way we can kind of get an idea of what some lighting is going to look like in here. And so now we're going to go back to that lighting tab that we put up there earlier. I'm just going to spread this out a little bit so I can kind of see what I'm working with here. So I'm going to leave these basic settings in here for now. But to get started with this bake, again, we're going to make sure one more thing that's very, very important. Let's go to our model, and we're going to expand all of the objects inside of this model. And we're going to want to make sure that there's a static button up here. We want to check that static button. And the reason why we want to do that is that if they're not checked as static, then when we bake the light maps onto this model, then they won't actually receive any of the lighting that we've added. And so it will assume that it's a moving object if we don't check that. And so let's say I had an object that would animate or move. I don't want to bake a shadow onto it because it wouldn't make any sense. And so those items you'll leave unchecked as static. So because I don't have any moving objects in my scene, I'm actually just going to leave everything static here. And now I'm ready for my bake. So I'm going to go back to lighting. I'm going to leave these settings here, basic, and I'm going to click generate lighting. Now what that's going to do is it's going to start down here generating my my basic lighting, and this can take, guys, a long time. If you look here, this looks like it's going to take at least 5-10 minutes. It could be shorter than that, again, because I've used the basic settings. But when we go to change those to some high quality lighting settings, I've seen some of my scenes take somewhere between 8 and 10 hours to bake. So but for the basic lighting settings that we have, this is going to be good enough for us to get an idea of what it's going to look like. So I'm just going to fast forward to the end of the video when this is done, and then we'll go from there.
2,000 years later.
Okay, and we're back. The baked lighting is done. It took about a few minutes, and typically this, if you had really high quality light bake settings, could take hours. But because I just did a quick bake with the default settings, my lighting is complete and I am ready to test it out. And so as you can see, because it was kind of a quick light bake, the textures look really pixelated. Again, that's just because we did it quickly. If I go back and change to more high quality settings that we'll go over later in another video, the light quality and the bake will be much better. But we're just doing this to kind of get an idea. So now we'll go back to test active scene. We'll continue. Now I may have a problem uploading this one because now I have a a baked light map in here that did increase the size of my project. I deleted all of my normals earlier to kind of reduce that size. in order to be able to upload the entire project to the sandbox and try it out. So hopefully this doesn't bring me back over that limit and we can test. But if it does, then we'll just have to publish and sort of fast forward the video and once it's ready. So yeah, it looks like now with my light maps, I'm back over the 100 meg limit. And so for what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna actually publish my scene, just like we did yesterday, and I'm going to fast forward to the end, to when we actually have this published, and I can show you what that's going to look like live.
3,000 years later.
And we're back. It seems like I've given it enough time for the upload to process, so I'm going to go back to spatial, and we're going to check out our world that we've uploaded with the new lighting baked in. And so I'm going to go to spaces and then University of the Metaverse, which I did change, by the way. When you first upload your world, it's going to say something like your name and then hi-fi space or lo-fi area, and I'm going to show you how to change that real quick. And so when you first load into the world, you'll see the name right under your avatar's face, and if you click that, it'll open up a info box where you can just fill that out and then hit save. You can even upload a custom thumbnail if you want one. And so once you get done with that, just hit save, and that'll save your world info settings. So look, now you can see just how much better this scene looks than it originally did back when we first started this project. With this baked lighting, even just the basic baked lighting settings, this looks so much better. And so when you're going for a realistic VR type environment or scene, this is one of the most important things you can do, is make sure that you have nice baked lighting settings. And so far, even with the basic default settings, this looks so much better. And so we're going to go with that for today. And so that's pretty much it, guys. That's the basic lighting settings that will give you at least an idea of how to get started. When you upload your world initially, how to get some decent lighting, because this doesn't look bad at all. Later in a future video, we'll go through some more advanced lighting settings as well as techniques that I use to achieve some really realistic looking scenes. But for now, this should be able to get you started. So thanks for watching, guys. Tune in next week with another episode of Building the Metaverse with Metaverse Josh. Thank you.